August 7th, 1944. The dawn light over Normandy bled through low clouds like a furnace behind wet steel. Engines coughed, tracks clattered, and somewhere near the French town of Mortain, a young lieutenant from the U.S. 120th Infantry unfolded a rain-soaked map that was, in every technical sense, wrong. The contour lines had been printed in the wrong scale. The grid references mismatched the Corps' overlay. A clerical mistake, dismissed in the confusion of the breakout from St. Lo, placed his battalion nearly 2 kilometers north of their assigned blocking position. To his staff sergeant it looked like a blunder. To the Germans advancing that morning with 6 Panzer divisions, it would soon look like a death trap. The U.S. Army's 30th Infantry Division, known as Old Hickory, had been ground down to barely 11,000 men from its pre-invasion strength of 14,500. Its companies were thin, with rifle platoons often down to 18 effectives instead of 36. They'd been ordered to hold Hill 314, a bald ridge east of Mortain, overlooking the narrow road network the Wehrmacht needed for its counteroffensive. Operation Lüttich, conceived by Hitler himself, was meant to punch a corridor through the American lines and drive to Avranches, cutting off Patton's armored spearheads. The German 2nd SS Das Reich, 1st SS Leibstandarte, and 116th Panzer divisions fielded around 200 operational tanks and assault guns, supported by 45,000 men. But fuel shortages meant half their vehicles carried only enough gasoline for 50 kilometers. That misfolded American map was a leftover from a pre-breakout printing. Its grid lines, based on outdated French survey data from 1932, when Lieutenant Harold Biggs and his platoon turned west to take position. The error placed them not behind the expected tree line, but along a sunken lane cut through an apple orchard, a natural funnel. He cursed the oversight and ordered his men to dig in anyway, their entrenching tools biting into wet clay. They were supposed to link with Company F on their left, but radio interference, static from the SCR 300 sets overloaded by atmospheric moisture, left them isolated. No one corrected their position. When the first German panzers came, it wasn't in daylight, but under the strangled glow of early dawn. The engines of Panther Ausf G tanks, each driven by a 700-horsepower Maybach HL230 P30 engine, growled through the mist like metal beasts. The Panther's 75mm KDK 42 guns could punch through Sherman armor at 1,800 meters, but the terrain of Mortain wasn't tank country. It was hedgerow labyrinth. Their flanks were hidden behind bocage so thick even reconnaissance planes struggled to see movement. The German spearhead, commanded by General Hans Funk, assumed the ridgeline was thinly held. They didn't know that the 120th Infantry, misplaced and stubborn, had dug into the very road the Panthers needed. By 0500 hours, artillery from the U.S. 197th Field Artillery Battalion began firing 105mm shells with timed fuses set at 0.2 seconds, air bursting over the treetops. The smell of ammonium picrate mixed with damp foliage. Biggs's men, 138 soldiers, and 2 machine gun sections crouched in their foxholes as the first German half-tracks crested the bend. Sergeant Charles Devereux, manning a 30-caliber Browning M19 Weinräten V19 waited until the front vehicle, a command half-track carrying radio equipment, was 30 meters away before squeezing the trigger. The stream of tracer rounds, cycling at 500 per minute, tore through the windshield. The ambush began not by plan, but by reaction. At Battalion HQ 2 kilometers away, Major Thomas Howe, soon killed in the same battle, listened in confusion to frantic radio calls describing German armor at grid 428-621. That coordinate didn't exist on his overlay. He thought it was a misreport. In fact, it was his own map's fault. The stupid mistake had placed Biggs's platoon squarely across the German approach, without artillery registration, without supporting armor, but with a perfect field of fire across a sunken bottleneck barely 4 meters wide. The first 30 minutes became a slaughterhouse of steel. The Americans had 6 M1 bazookas, range barely 150 meters. Against Panthers with 80mm frontal armor, their only hope was the side plates, just 45mm thick. Corporal Melvin Sells waited until the lead tank tried to pivot through the hedge and fired 2 rockets at 25 meters. The backblast scorched his face, but both projectiles hit the engine compartment. The Panther burned in seconds, its ammunition cooking off at 150 bacon. The explosion lit the lane like a welding torch. German radio discipline broke down almost immediately. Panzer grenadiers dismounted and tried to flank left. But the map-misplaced Americans had unknowingly positioned themselves along a concealed slope that nullified the German maneuver. From the higher orchard bank, riflemen fired downward, gravity aiding their rounds. The first wave collapsed in chaos. Overhead, US P-47 Thunderbolts from the 405th Fighter Group circled at 8,000 feet, waiting for clear weather. Each carried 2 500 lb general-purpose bombs and 8 5-inch HVAR rockets. The pilots couldn't yet see the fight below, but radio chatter intercepted from the 30th Division hinted at a breakthrough attempt. By mid-morning, Biggs's platoon had fired nearly 6,000 rounds of .30 caliber ammunition, melting 2 barrels. Their rations were soaked, their canteens low, but morale was almost manic. They thought they were encircled. They didn't realize that their accidental position had blocked the entire 1st SS Panzer spearhead for 3 critical hours. Behind them, engineers rushed to lay 150mm howitzer batteries, M1 guns capable of firing a 95-pound shell over 14 miles. Those guns would later devastate the stalled column. As the day wore on, the Germans regrouped. They brought up Nebelwerfer 15-cm rocket launchers, firing high-explosive warheads that screamed like turbines. Each salvo contained 6 rockets, each weighing 75 pounds. The sound was psychological warfare. German troops called it Heulende Kuh, the wailing cow. The Americans hugged their trenches, soil raining down, ears ringing. Private First Class Orville Denton later wrote, "It was like God was tearing sheet metal in the sky." Still, the misplaced platoon held. By late afternoon, the weather cleared. The Thunderbolts finally dove. The first attack run, by Captain James H. Reed, released 2 bombs from 4,500 feet. Both struck within 30 meters of the German column. A Panther's turret blew off like a manhole cover, weighing nearly 2.5 tons. In the confusion, American artillery registered new coordinates, ironically derived from Biggs's mistaken grid. Within minutes, 12 batteries opened fire, blanketing the Mortain road with 1,800 shells. German radio logs later recovered described it as Feuerregen, a rain of fire. The cost to the 120th Infantry was savage. By nightfall, of the original 138 men, only 62 were still combat effective. Ammunition was almost gone. The wounded lay on ponchos, morphine syrettes pinned to their collars. Yet the damage inflicted on the Germans was catastrophic. 17 Panthers destroyed, 11 half-tracks burned, roughly 350 casualties. A single company had blunted a corps-level armored thrust. At 2200 hours, German commanders finally realized their route was blocked. They tried a flank through Saint-Barthélemy, only to encounter the rest of the 30th Division, now reinforced by the 35th Tank Battalion of the 3rd Armored Division. Those Shermans, M4A1 models with Continental, R975 radial engines producing 400 horsepower, were mechanically inferior to the Panthers, but far more numerous. U.S. logistics by August 1944 could deliver 1 new Sherman for every 3 lost, while the Germans could replace only 1 Panther for every 9 destroyed. Industrial mathematics, more than heroics, was already deciding the war. Through the night, Hill 314 burned like a forge. Flares drifted in the sky. The sound of distant 50-caliber fire echoed off stone walls. Inside a farmhouse cellar, Biggs's surviving men divided their last water. They'd been fighting without resupply for 18 hours. The nearest friendly line was a kilometer downhill, unreachable under machine gun crossfire. Still, the lieutenant refused to withdraw. He didn't know he was now the hinge point of the entire Allied front in Normandy. When dawn rose again on August 8th, the 2nd SS Panzer Division launched renewed assaults. Infantry with MG-42s advanced behind smoke. The MG-42's cyclic rate, 1/200 rounds per minute, was twice that of the Browning. Its metallic clatters sounded like tearing cloth. Yet the terrain worked against them. Every attempt to climb the slope brought them into overlapping fields of fire. A U.S. 81mm mortar crew dug into a hedgerow pocket, fired 219 rounds in 4 hours, their barrels glowing red. Shrapnel shredded the German infantry lines. The mistake that had placed Biggs's platoon on that hill had effectively created a natural crossfire geometry, something even experienced planners rarely achieved intentionally. By 1,000 hours, Allied air dominance turned the tide completely. P-47s, P-38 Lightnings, and RAF Typhoons attacked continuously, dropping over 1,500 tons of bombs in the Mortain sector over 2 days. German losses totaled 46 tanks confirmed destroyed, 70 vehicles abandoned for lack of fuel. One Typhoon squadron reported destroying a Panzer column using 27 rockets in 3 passes. The Luftwaffe, crippled by fuel starvation, managed only 40 sorties in the same period, losing 16 aircraft to anti-aircraft fire. The hill's defenders were now running on sheer endurance. Dehydration set in, the medics rationed iodine tablets. Blood and dust coated every uniform. Sergeant Devereaux's hands were raw from swapping hot machine gun barrels. At noon, artillery shell fragments tore through Biggs's leg, nearly severing it. He refused evacuation. Command finally managed to locate his position precisely, discovering for the first time that his coordinates had been off by 1,900 meters. The division commander, Major General Leland Hobbs, famously said, "Tell that man his blunder saved the army." Over the next 3 days, the 30th Division held firm while the German offensive collapsed. Ultra-intercepts later revealed that Hitler had personally demanded the Mortain assault continue despite clear failure. By August 12th, the 2nd SS Panzer and 116th Panzer were in retreat, short 150 tanks and over 3,000 men. The Falaise Pocket would soon form, trapping what remained of Army Group B historians often debate how much a single map error could matter in a campaign that involved 2 million soldiers. Yet the data are striking. Had Biggs's platoon taken its assigned position, flat, open ground east of Mortain, the German column would have advanced unchecked for at least 3 more hours. Those hours were the difference between Patton's Third Army being cut off or linking its supply corridor to Brittany. U.S. supply trucks, nicknamed Red Ball Express, were already moving 12,500 tons of fuel and ammunition daily through that corridor. Losing it would have paralyzed the Allied advance. A clerical mistake preserved it. After the battle, the surviving Americans on Hill 314 were evacuated by jeep convoy. They had held for 96 hours, repelling repeated armored attacks with minimal artillery support. Their total casualties, 277. Estimated German losses inflicted, over 1,400. The terrain was littered with burned armor, each tank a twisted monument to a misread map. Engineers later measured the field of fire, exactly 120 meters wide, 400 meters deep, the ideal geometry for an ambush. Though no one had designed it that way, from a technical perspective, the ambush succeeded because of intersecting errors. The faulty map scale, 150,000 instead of 125,000, a misprinted coordinate column, and the platoon's inability to raise headquarters on the SCR-300 due to wet antenna. Insulation. all combined to produce what military theorists call serendipitous enfilade. The Germans entered the kill zone, aligned with the Americans' axis of fire, exposing their thinner side armor. Combat reports later used this case to teach terrain exploitation at Fort Benning's infantry school. But beyond the statistics lay the raw human cost. The men of the 120th fought hungry, deafened, half-blind with exhaustion. They urinated in helmets because leaving foxholes meant death. They counted ammunition by weight because cartridges were too muddy to count. They wrote letters in the dirt with rifle butts, hoping someone would find them. When relief finally arrived, one corporal tried to salute and collapsed instead. The German survivors described the same battle in mechanical terms. Panther crewman Helmut Wüstner recalled, "The Americans were ghosts in the orchard. We never saw them, only muzzle flashes. We thought they had many machine guns, but it was one man moving between holes." His company lost 9 of 12 tanks before retreating. For them, the ambush wasn't a trap. It was a blind spot in their orders, an oversight of terrain, just as Biggs's error had been for the Americans. By mid-August, the Normandy campaign shifted irrevocably. The German front disintegrated west of the Seine. In the logistics ledgers of Schaff, analysts noted that the Mortain counterattack burned an estimated 1.2 million liters of fuel, enough to supply an entire Panzer army for 3 days. The Wehrmacht could never recover that consumption. A single platoon's misplaced defense had forced Hitler's last reserve to exhaust itself in a cul-de-sac of French farmland. In the post-war years, the U.S. Army quietly reviewed its cartographic procedures. New standards were introduced: double-checked grid overlays, weatherproof inks, redundant radio authentication. Instructors at West Point used the Mortain incident to illustrate the fog of war not as metaphor, but as a literal condition: rain, misprint, static, and fatigue combining to rewire destiny. Lieutenant Harold Biggs was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross. He never claimed heroism. When interviewed in 1952, he said simply, "We went where the map told us, and the Germans went where fate sent them." He died in 1971, never knowing that his stupid mistake became a case study in operational unpredictability. Even today, the hill near Mortain remains scarred. Unearthed shell casings, twisted metal fragments, and a few rusted helmets mark the line. French farmers still refer to it as La Colline des Américains Perdus, the Hill of the Lost Americans. Looking back, the story defies tidy lessons. Military planning thrives on precision. Yet here, precision failed and chaos produced symmetry. A misdrawn line on a wet piece of paper reshaped an entire front. The map that betrayed intention became the blueprint of victory. In the wider context of World War II, where entire cities were destroyed by design, Warsaw by decree, Dresden by plan, Mortain stands as an inversion, a triumph born not of order, but of error. Strategy and chance collided, and for once, chance favored the side least expecting it. The Allies would march east, liberating Paris within 3 weeks, crossing the Rhine 7 months later. But hidden inside that triumph lay the imprint of a young lieutenant's trembling hand holding a faulty map in the Normandy rain. War is an industry of precision built upon human imperfection. And sometimes, as Mortain proved in August 1944, the smallest miscalculation of ink and paper can redraw the entire geometry of history.